The numbers, Mason. What do they mean? Let's talk about the data in the flow feed and some considerations to make when examining it. Let's ask ourselves a simple question. What is it we're trying to do by poring over options flow data? We're trying to identify when smart money is making a move. Generally speaking, we're trying to follow smart money into trades, but being able to identify when smart money is closing a long or a short may also be important to know. Let's just talk about trying to follow them into trades. In simpler terms, we want to know when whales are buying to open or selling to open their positions. It is not always obvious when a transaction in the flow feed is an opening trade. Sometimes the relationship between the size of the trade, the volume, and the open interest of the contract line up in such a manner that the trade can be positively identified as an opening trade. This type of trade is identified with this bag emoji. The emoji legend can be referenced by selecting the Info tab. If we reference this FSLR trade, we can see that it has been labeled as an opening trade. The size of the trade was 2,976 contracts. The 3,005 contract volume includes the 2,976 of the respective transaction. So prior to this trade, the volume for this contract was 29. With an open interest of 914 and only 29 other possible contracts traded, a trade of 2,976 contracts cannot be anything but an opening trade. As mentioned in the legend, only trades that can be positively identified as an opening trade will be labeled as such. Many trades in the flow feed will be opening trades, but won't be expressly labeled as such if the values used in the example don't line up properly. Part of reading the flow is being able to make educated assumptions about when contracts are being opened, even if they are not expressly labeled as such. Here are a couple examples of being able to identify opening transactions that aren't expressly labeled. Let's take a look at some RK options flow. These three RK transactions highlighted occurred at the same time and were all for the same contract. Given that they took place at the same time and are all similarly sized, we can make a high probability assumption that this was all from the same trader. The reason that it's broken up into three lines of data is because each of the three transactions took place on a different exchange. The executing exchange is a data point that can be toggled on, but it's not an important data point in my opinion. So if we've reasoned that these three transactions were part of the same trade, and that the bottommost transaction is an opening trade, then we can reason that the other two are also opening trades even though they are not expressly labeled as such. Some more of these same contracts were traded as the session continued. We can also reason that these were likely opening trades as well, given what we already know. Take a look at this CAD flow from October. This is a really good example of buyers in action. At no point in this flow data are we spoon-fed that opening options activity is occurring, but a trained eye can make a very educated deduction. Several elements are at play here, as outlined in this tweet. The data shown, which takes place over the span of 4 minutes, from 10:04 a.m. to 10:08 a.m., shows over 7,500 contracts being traded in that short time span. With open interest at 333 and over 7,500 contracts traded in a short time span, it's highly likely that the bulk of the activity is from traders opening their calls. The move to the underlying wasn't even that high in the 4-minute span, but the contract premium, volume, and IV spiked significantly in tandem. Given a skew to the ask, we can lean towards assuming that this opening activity is a result of traders buying calls. I noticed this flow and was pretty quick on the trigger, sharing it pretty much as soon as the traders had made their move. Here's a more granular look at the flow feed. At 10:05, there were about 3,000 contracts traded. 15 minutes later, there were 13,500 contracts traded, and an hour and a half after the initial flow, volume was over 19,500 and the contracts had traded as high as 685. Here's an example of some flow with many similar characteristics. Note the volume rapidly exceeding the open interest over a short period of time, with the skew towards the ask and IV rising. Here's yet another example with a much larger open interest value to navigate. Almost 14,000 open interest, but over 15,500 contracts traded in the span of literally 3 seconds, with almost 13,000 contracts moved in the initial second. With the fill prices skewing towards the bid and IV dropping, this has the look and feel of a short put position, which is generally seen as a bullish position. if you select the contract expiration date, you can view, among other things, a chart depicting the volume and price movement of the selected contract. Apple grinded higher all day, giving this trader a nice unrealized gain intraday. Before we wrap up this video, let's talk about a few limitations of option flow to consider. One of the biggest limitations is that we have no idea what other positions these whales are in when they make their moves. For example, a whale might have a short position in stock ABC worth millions of dollars. They may look to hedge their short position by buying upside long calls. We would see these calls in the flow feed but wouldn't know that they were a hedge. Another limitation of options flow is that nothing expressly states that an option was purchased or sold. We can attempt to use the bid-ask spread and the price that the contracts changed hands at, along with other values previously discussed in this video, to make an educated guess. However, using the bid-ask spread and the fill price might not always be an effective means of guessing sentiment, as large block trades are often privately negotiated with the only stipulation that the negotiated price is at or around the current market rate. Alright, that was a lot to digest in a single video. If you didn't pick up on all of it, that's okay. Like most other things, it takes some time and initiative in order to make the most of your options flow analysis. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let us know in the comment section below.